Today we're looking at freedom from attachments to the past. This has a lot of implications. What I would like to really focus on is the past, meaning even 5 minutes ago. Doesn't have to be our childhood, doesn't have to be the early days of our lives or early incidents that happened a decade ago or whatever it can be. And I think that's really the place where it's really most appropriate is to think of what are you doing now with your mind? What am I doing now with my mind? Am I looking at something that's already gone, or am I living in the now moment? When it comes to religion, when it comes to the spiritual path, we have a tendency to look to the past. We have a tendency to look back. And it's pretty interesting. We need to know our history. We need to know the dynamic that brought the whole idea of church into being. It's a pretty interesting history. And there's value in looking back to the past and looking at how things developed. But I was reading yesterday about the Gnostic movement that began to emerge. It actually, I think, emerged about the same time that the first gospel, the Gospel of Mark, was written, and maybe even like 10 years prior to that. And I'm not saying that as a matter of fact. I'm saying that's what I believe it, became a prominent thing, because the early church leaders, and one in particular, Bishop Irenaeus, I think his name is, if I'm pronouncing it properly. I've heard it several ways, but he was a very prominent figure in the early church, and he totally denounced the Gnostic movement because it had become fairly strong. And the Gnostic movement embraced Jesus as a very important figure in their teachings. But the way they latched onto him was they saw him as one who came to awaken the individual to their spiritual dimension, to their spiritual reality, which is what unity has always been about. And the early church didn't like that. They saw themselves as the one you need to look to, the power you need to look to. And this was one of the bishop's main complaints. When a Gnostic group would get together and meet, and they had a hierarchy, but it was quite different. The ones that were acknowledged were the ones that had had a mystical experience, ones that had had a spiritual awakening. And they were initiated into the realm of leadership. But in terms of leadership, every time they would have a meeting, they would cast lots to decide who would play what role. One would be a deacon, one would be a reader, one would be whatever, and that can change with each meeting. And this completely upset the bishop, because he said that the church is a reflection of the heavenly state, and the bishop plays the role of God, basically, because God isn't here to tell people what to do, so we will. And it was very important for him for the early church to get that idea across. And so anyone who did not, their biggest complaint, one of their biggest complaints against the Gnostics, and he wrote a 5-volume book about how horrible these people were and how they should be exterminated, did not have a favorable attitude toward them at all. But it was a popular movement at the time because of the freedom that they gave their followers from the institution. But Irenaeus believed that the church had the power over laity. Whatever we say goes. That's basically how it is. Whereas the Gnostic would say, listen to your inner guidance. Listen to the spirit within yourself. And so that's sort of what separates New Thought from mainstream Christianity today, is that very same attitude. We do not adopt a lot of the beliefs of the Gnostics. Some of them are fairly bizarre, but their bottom line about the spiritual path is you are connected, every individual is connected to the whole, to God. And that is the ultimate authority in the individual's life. And they recognized that the ones who had not had any kind of spiritual awakening needed the guidance of the church. They needed the guidance of the institution. That's how they viewed that. But they promoted meditation. They promoted going within and having your own direct experience. So that was a big fight, and it was a substantial fight, and it was not the only fight that the early church was involved in. They got into a pretty good one with Paul. But what I'm saying here is the past, how we view the whole religious thing today is influenced by our history, by the history of the development of the church. And many of us carry a lot of those ideas, whether we were actually directly exposed to them or not. When you hear this talk about Jesus being your personal Savior, we're looking at the past. We're looking at a theological construct that Jesus himself probably did not embrace. I think there's very good evidence that he didn't. So a lot of our spiritual thinking is influenced by the past. And we've got to put that in perspective. That's what I think the value of critical scholarship is all about. It helps free us from that chain of thought. And again, as we drove into Kansas and into Missouri, the fundamental religion hangs as heavy as the humidity there. It is, you actually go into a consciousness where that is so strong, and billboards, all along the way are Jesus is real. The one I shared last year, we saw it again this year. If you die today, where will you spend your eternity? And I think I said last year, if I died there, it'd be in Kansas probably. But it's like, where does that come from? Does it come from Jesus, or does it come from the early church teachings? And that is what sets us free. Part of knowing the truth that sets us free is understanding historically. So there is a value in looking at the past and breaking some of the chains of our thinking that keep us on a certain level, keep us on a certain trajectory, so we can kind of wipe the slate clean. Because if you think about it, God is omnipresent. God is not more present now than ever. God is as present now as ever. And you and I are expressions of that. So that means that relationship is a here-now thing. It is current. It's not something that happens in the past. It's something that is going on at this very moment. So there's value in looking back at how all of this started, but how obligated are we to maintain it? And in some people's mind, it's not an obligation, it's just the way it is. It's so accepted as true that we don't question it. That's what it is. That's what religion is. And we will abide by that. So if that's where a person is, that's fine. We don't want to try to upset that perspective. But what happens when a person starts asking questions about where does this come from? Why do I believe this? What did Jesus, who was he? And what did he teach? It's a fascinating area, but the deeper we get into asking those kinds of questions, the freer we become. And I have no fear whatsoever of being condemned to hell for talking about stuff like this and for changing my belief system. And I'm not really sure I ever changed it, because I'm not sure I totally bought into the old way. It's just what was put on my plate, it was put on most of our plates as here it is, here's the truth, here's reality. But when you get to the point where you can start saying, is that right? Is that real? Is that really true? And you start asking questions, then you discover material. You discover there are scholars out there, there are people who are asking the same question that know how to answer it, that know how to approach it in ways that become very helpful to us. So in that type of regard, it is the past is okay to explore. We don't want to live back there, but what it actually does frees us to live in the present more so. Because again, if I die today, I'm not the least bit concerned about going to hell. I have absolutely no fear of that at all. And there would be people who would be happy to disagree. We have a guy that's been commenting on YouTube. You know, he's sure that I and all of you are going to hell. He doesn't come out and say that, but he just says that he made a statement that I'm walking blind. He even commented on Erica last week. So I delete him every time I see him. You know, that's the advantage of that world. You can just delete your problems, you know, delete the people that don't. And I don't care if he disagrees. I don't care if people disagree. But why use our platform to do it? You know, why not go out and start your own church or do whatever you want to do to convince your people, the people that will follow you. And the truth is, nobody will probably follow this guy. They're not interested in what he has to say. That's why he uses our platform. But it's a thing that we'll never end up dealing with. There's always going to be somebody out there that has not asked the same questions. So it's important to be able to know why we don't continue down a certain path. It's important that we're able to answer the questions for ourselves. You may not be able to explain it to anybody else, and that's okay. You don't have to. But today we're looking basically at the nowness of the presence and why it's important to stay on that, in that, to be aware of that dynamic of where our mind is. Are we looking to the past? Are we looking to the future? Are we living here? So there's three statements or three incidents here that were given. As they were going along the road, a man said to him, and that's Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." That's kind of a strange answer to, it's not even an answer, it's a statement to a statement. I'll follow you wherever you go. Well, Jesus is kind of throwing up a warning. And I've talked about this before, but it's what he is saying here, the Son of Man is the human being. It's not him, it's not Jesus, it's the human being. That's how it's translated. When Jesus talks about the Son of Man, he could replace that with a common human being. What's that mean? We have no place to lay our head. He's saying that you don't end up here. There's no place that you're going to end up. Foxes have their holes. They have a place that they live and can predict. The birds of the air have nests. Very predictable lives. But one who is on the spiritual path, you need to open your mind to realize this earth is not your home. This physical body is not your home. Can you do that? If you were to follow me, you've got to be willing to hold the larger picture. That there's nothing here that we're going to accomplish that's going to be satisfying. That it is something larger than that. And so Jesus is kind of, by making the statement, he's throwing back on this person, "I'll follow you anywhere." And he's saying, "Are you sure?" Because there's nowhere to go. We're not going anyplace. We are going here. We're going to learn to live in this now moment because this is where we are. And God is a present reality here and now. It's not something like the fox has the den. It's a learning process where when you get to the end of that learning process, you'll have it. It's an ongoing thing. The Son of Man or the human being has an infinite capacity and will never end the learning process. So are you willing to do that? Or do you want to latch on to something? I'll follow you anywhere. That means Wherever you go, I'll go and we'll end up there together. And he's saying, we're not going to end up anyplace. That's what the spiritual path is. And that's a very healthy attitude for each one of us. We keep trying to grasp what is truth. We keep trying to put our arms around it and say, here it is, here's the truth. Truth is dynamic. It is a state of mind, a state of being, a state of awareness, where we live in God, in the awareness of the infinite, that this earth is not our home, this body is a place that we inhabit for a time, but we are much more than this. In other words, are we willing to open our minds to that degree? There are a lot of people that get into this type of thinking and work at thinking positive so we can be successful, that is, end up in a particular state. Well, what if that doesn't happen? Does that mean that these principles don't work, or does it mean that we're trying to apply them in a way that doesn't work? That we're thinking like the fox with the hole and the bird with the nest. There's places that we end up. So Jesus is, I think, responding to this person in this way. Are you willing to give up all of your preconceptions about why you're even here, about what life is about? And I think we need to do that. We each need to do that in our own way. That's not a negative thing. It is taking on the larger picture. And isn't that what science is doing all the time? You know, with our space exploration, we're looking out all the time. When do you think we'll reach the end of that? Isn't that kind of the exciting aspect of it? For everything we discover, there's more. We discover more. There's more. For every question we answer, we raise 10 more. It's a pretty exciting thing, and it's I'm really drawn to that type of learning. But what we're doing, see, the mindset used to be that we live in this static place, and the earth was the center of it all. So look at how far we've come since then. You know, do you think we're better off knowing that we live, we're part of, you know, this galaxy system, and our galaxy is part of another group of galaxies, and that in turn is part of another, and it just goes on and on and on. It's a very freeing thought to say, because then we say, well, if I'm a soul, if I'm an infinite soul and I'm here for a time, then what's the big picture like? You know, that's how we step upon this path. There's no place on this planet to lay our heads. That's not what it's about. It's about developing a cosmic awareness. And I know that's quite a mouthful and not near what Jesus said to this person, but I think that's what he was implying. He was saying, you think you want to follow me, what's that mean? You know, whatever it means to you, it's probably wrong. There's a lot more to what you're asking, to what you're saying, than what you realize. And I think that should be true with all of us. I'm not in the same place I was when I started this unity journey. And I feel now like I'm just catching on to some things in a way that are meaningful to me, in a way that are far surpass what I started out with. So we say, well, I got in unity, and so I've got it. No. Because what unity has done, it stirs the pot. And that's what all religion should do. What religion tends to do is we get into it, we learn all the dogma and the creed, and we're supposed to have it. And then we're going to end up in heaven. We stop someplace, we end up someplace. But here we say, you know, the soul is infinite. You don't end up anyplace. You don't end up. There's no place to go. We're in it. We're here. It's a matter of awakening to that. And a lot of people can't grasp that. They want to be handed a list of beliefs that you adopt. Can you accept those? Yes, I can accept them. You're in. When I was baptized, immersed, you know, that's what I felt like. That was kind of the key. Once you're immersed, you've got it. And that felt pretty good for a while, but then I started thinking, I wonder if I've got it. I wonder if this is all there is, because if it is, it doesn't feel too satisfying. That's the soul saying, don't stop here. You're not going to stop here. You keep going. So that's kind of what Jesus is throwing back on this fellow. To another he said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go bury my father. But he said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. So this person responds in what seems to be a very reasonable way. It's an earthly obligation. Do you think Jesus was saying, don't take care of your earthly obligations? I don't think he's saying that. He's saying that, yes, we do that kind of stuff, but what you're doing is using that as an excuse to not delve deeper. There's always going to be somebody to bury. There's always going to be something to do. There's always going to be some reason that you can't take time to be still and, follow Jesus in that regard, to find that inner kingdom. There's always going to be something. If you don't believe it, just sit down to meditate, close your eyes, and see how many fathers you have to bury. They pop up like crazy. Just one thing after another. Get your attention. So he's not really talking about burying family members. He's talking about the mind that throws up these things, reasons why we cannot embrace the larger picture. There will always be a reason. There will always be some thing that keeps our attention grounded in something other than the now moment. So he's saying, basically, are you willing to understand that, fulfill your earthly obligations, but also give to God what is God's? It's just a way of asking that, I think, in a roundabout way. Another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. Jesus said to him, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. So that's kind of interesting. I've used that statement in a little slightly different context before. But does this mean again that he's saying you don't deal with family members? Jesus was accompanied by his family all of his life. His mother was there, according to the stories, at the cross. One of his brothers took over the church, led the church, the early church, James, for quite some time before he was executed. But he had family members around him all of his life. So he's not saying, let's not do that. But it is, again, somebody's saying, I have obligations. And he said, if you put your hand to the plow, you say you want to follow me, you say you want to discover this inner kingdom, there will always be a reason why you can turn away from that. So when he says that, whoever puts his hand to the plow and then turns away, you can just think about the imagery there. You'll never get the field plowed. That's what happens. Nothing happens. So all of these incidents, series of statements, all point to the same issue. If you want to begin again, you must release your attachments to the past. This is not so much a call to let go of memories, fond or otherwise, but rather to stop using energy to continue to respond to these memories. You see the difference. You can have an experience in your past, and you can relive that experience and pour a lot of emotion into it, wish it didn't happen or wish it had happened differently or have regret about it or whatever. What you're doing is you're living in the now moment, using your current energies to respond to something in the past, which is exactly like living in the now moment and responding to something in the present. The question is, where are you putting your energy? So he's not saying, or we're not saying you forget the past, that you try to change what's happened in the past, you try to reevaluate it. There's no way we can really do that. But we can watch how we're dealing with it. Have you ever had a dream about something that happened in the past, and you wake up and you maybe you're in a cold sweat or you're having some kind of reaction to whatever it is was in that dream. It's just as real to you for that few moments of before you reach total clarity. That's an experience. And what we do with our memories a lot of times is it's just like a dream. We think about it and we have a reaction to it. And that reaction is our use of our present energy, our resources, our thought ability and our emotional ability. And yet we are directing it to something that is of no value. There's nothing we can do about it. But we will rehearse this kind of thing and relive it. And so the issue here is to just be aware. When you're thinking about something in the past, and again, it could be 10 minutes ago, and you're having a reaction to it that's not really conducive to what you want to experience in life, you ask the question, am I willing to, is my hand to the plow or am I letting go? Am I turning away? Am I using my energy in the very best way possible? And I guarantee you that you won't be all the time. That we often entertain ideas of the past that we can really do nothing about, but we're trying to. We're trying to resolve them. We're trying to do something about them. And we're having possibly a very negative experience over something we can do nothing about. So that's the question. And I mean, that's the bottom line, the prompting that we're looking at. The only place we can effectively act is in the now moment. When we feel overburdened, it is because we are expending energy focusing on problems that are impossible to resolve in the present. You can get just as exhausted plowing one furrow 100 times as plowing 100 furrows once, and the result will be much less satisfying. The people that are looking at our facility here wanted to do a furnace inspection, and we talked to a furnace contractor some years ago that didn't give a real bright outlook on our furnace here. And so my thinking, when this group would come in and inspect the furnace, they were going to find something pretty bad about it. Well, they didn't. They said it was surprisingly in good shape for its age. Somebody told me that this week as well, but it's so you're living with this thing that doesn't even exist, but having a reaction. My reaction of wondering what they're going to find. And I guarantee you, they did a thorough inspection of this unit. They were here for over 2 hours. The bottom line is the furnace guy wanted to sell us a furnace. That's really what it comes down to. It's kind of a conflict of interest. So I'm not going to give you a good diagnosis, if I want to sell you a furnace. So you get someone who really has a vested interest in the truth, and they come up with the truth. So, but the point of that story is my thinking, the experience I kind of went through as I was thinking about, I knew they were over here. What are they finding now? I can just see the whole thing exploding, having all these visions that had nothing to do with the reality. But that was my experience. At that moment, that's the quality of my life at that moment. So how do you stop that kind of thing? And that's what most of the negativity that we go through is. It's perception that has nothing to do with actually what's going on. Solutions to our challenges have a way of presenting themselves, though not necessarily on demand. We sometimes have to let situations mature to the point where we know exactly what to do. And Jesus talked about letting the weeds and the crops grow together, refraining from pulling the weeds until they are clearly identifiable. So had I done that in this silly example, I wouldn't have even given a second thought to the inspectors coming in. I would have let the weeds grow. If they would have come back and said, this thing's about to blow up, I'd say, well, it is what it is. That's what it is. It's pretty old. But that didn't happen. So I had an experience that I didn't really need to have. So if I had done it as Jesus points out here, I would have not even given it a second thought, just let it go and let it come out like it did, and would not have been emotionally involved. But that's not generally what we do. We get into all kinds of projections, and those are often negative. So it's just something to think about. So we take time to connect with your source, or with our source. Know that you have the intelligence and energy necessary to do what lies before you. If you feel overburdened or that your life is going nowhere, know that you are plowing the same furrow. Let it go and move on. This is advice that we are all very much aware of, and I'm just reminding us of something we all know. It's just watch our thinking. If you're feeling down, if you feel like your life is not looking so good, how much of that is real? How much of that is projection? How much of it is, there's something I need to do before I deal with this energy? There's nothing we need to do except be here now. That's the challenge. That's the teaching of today. All right? Thank you for coming out, and we'll see you again next week.
1, 2, 3, 4. I was touched by an angel with butterfly wings, whispered laughter, bright days now bring. She gave me a kiss for peace and good fortune, sang me a song, sweet gentle tune. She sang, dance with the moon, dance with the sun, sing with the stars, bright days have come, you are a blessing, brighter than the sun. So laugh while you're dancing, bright days have come, bright days have come. I sat by a river, watching it flow. I saw in water, but I wanted to know. Joy of the moment, the dance of the light, at rest in the quiet, peace filled my mind. I heard fly with the sparrow, fly up the mountain, and rest in the meadow. Bright days have come, you are a blessing, brighter than the sun, like flowers in the fields. Bright days have come, bright days have come. I was touched by an angel with butterfly wings. She whispered a laughter, bright days now bring. She gave me a kiss for peace and good fortune, sang me a song, sweet gentle tune. Bright days have come, bright days have come, bright days have come, bright days have come.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.